Hello, welcome to Learning to Drum, Episode 4 in Week 7. I'm your host, Adam Tevlin, and the last 6 weeks we had talked about many different things in the history of Western drumming. That's drumming from the United States, and that's the perspective that we're coming from. And there's obviously different styles and approaches out there, even within the United States, as we talked about the founding fathers with Dom Famularo, Billy Gladstone, Sanford A. Muller, and George Lawrence Stone. And so we transgressed over into time and interviewed Kelvin Ward and showed us some of the things that he'd learned, not only from a drum corps perspective, but an HBCU perspective. And I think it's important to understand these different styles, and this is why we've had the first 6 weeks of just interviewing people and getting some knowledge down, because we want to have that good foundation. So the one thing that we did talk about are the 5 different strokes. Now, many people have different approaches like we talked about. Well, some people say there's 4, some people say there's 3, and even some people say there's 2, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But let's review the 5 different strokes. And so if you have your practice pad handy and your pair of sticks, I invite you to come join us and play along. And obviously, if this is your first time visiting the program, by all means, go back to episode 1 of Learning to Drum. You haven't missed much, not much playing that is, but there is a wealth of knowledge out there to go grab, so you just binge watch it and come catch up back with us here to this episode. Without further ado, make sure you have the correct grip. One thing that we pointed out is we're doing the American match grip, to where our thumb is off at a 45-degree angle. And this really kind of came to fruition, as far as me understanding, is with a timpanist that I've encountered back in 1993, and that was my freshman year of college. And his name was Mr. Rick Holmes. He was the principal timpanist to the St. Louis Symphony, and I know his son very well, and a good guy, and very good players. And the one thing that Mr. Holmes had pointed out is that, like most timpanists thinking that they have to play in the French grip fashion with the thumb on top of the stick, well, he adopted the American grip version. And he learned under Saul Goodman, who had a similar approach as well. So just make sure you have everything set, and this is what we call it in marching band and drum corps. We call this the set position. It's either the sticks are in or the sticks are out, ready to play. And in our case scenario, we're going to be ready to play. So make sure that our sticks are at a 45-degree angle, thumbs are at a 45, and we also identified the fulcrum in the stick, okay? So hopefully we're already there, and you have kind of a basic knowledge of that. The first stroke is the silent upstroke, which gets us prepared to play, right? And then we do the free stroke, which comes back up into the original position. Now we're in a free stroke in motion, as Don pointed out, because the next stroke after that is a downstroke, or it's also called a controlled stroke. Now, the controlled stroke or the downstroke, remember I told you that you want to let that energy transfer out through your body, all throughout your body. As you can see, it goes throughout my arm. Now, I had a father of a student of mine record this, and we're going to roll the clip here in a sec, but it shows you really what happens in slow motion. This is slowed down, I think, to 240 frames per second at 1080. So let's go ahead and run that clip, and you can see this controlled stroke or downstroke in action. Okay, ready? Okay, and so after our downstroke, we're in this low position, right? Now we're going to do the tap. Okay, there's my left tap. There's my right tap, okay? And then we're going to do the tap upstroke. Tap upstroke. So stroke number 1, silent upstroke. Stroke number 2, free stroke. Stroke number 3, controlled stroke or downstroke. Stroke number 4, tap. Stroke number 5, tap upstroke. Now we're in our original position. So let's try that together. Here we go. So ready? Silent upstroke at the right hand, free stroke, downstroke, tap, tap upstroke. Okay? So if you didn't get that, or if it's a little hard still, that's okay. As a matter of fact, what I would do, and I encourage my students to do, is just do the free stroke over and over and over. Just do the tap over and over and over, or the tap upstroke over and over and over. And do that with the left hand too as well. Here's my silent upstroke with the left. You can do this with me. Free stroke, downstroke, tap, tap upstroke. Okay? So get used to those 5 different strokes. Now, there's different approaches, like I said earlier, even in the United States. And I've even heard one educator say there's only 2 strokes, which is actually true. And Dom alluded this into the previous episode 2 in weeks 3 and 4, which really there's only 2 strokes, and that is the controlled stroke and the free stroke. You're either letting it rebound or you're controlling the stroke, whatever position you're in, whether it be high, medium, or low, right? Really, that's all it is, okay? So my silent upstroke, right? And now I got a free stroke, controlled stroke. The tap is just a low free stroke, right? So that's all I'm doing, because when I'm tapping, there is hardly any energy exerting other than letting the stick fall from an inch above the pad back up into my fingers, okay? All right, so work on that, get used to it. It is going to make more sense as we get into these exercises, and we're going to learn exercises. We're also going to learn rudiments, which I'm going to talk about here in just a sec, as well as learning how to read music. That's right, yes, we're going to learn how to read music on the show. Rudiments, what are rudiments? Rudiments are the basic principles or the basic acts, okay, of doing a certain task or a subject matter. And that's really what it's about. It doesn't even have to relate to drums. And what I've talked to many students about when I'm explaining what are rudiments is that think of like your favorite sport. And maybe one student might say, well, my favorite sport's baseball, or my favorite sport's basketball, or football, or whatnot. So I say, okay, what are some of the basic things in basketball? And they say, well, you gotta throw the ball. Right, pass the ball. Be able to catch the ball. That's another basic thing in basketball. How about running? That's right. That's one of the basic things you have to do in basketball, and you have to do a lot of it too. Okay? Also, dribbling. And the reason why I like using basketball as an analogy for drums is when you dribble the ball, you're actually following through with the ball. Right? And here's the key secret. When you're going from slow to fast on an exercise or a rudiment, there is a fine line between controlling the stick and letting the stick rebound so that way you can gain greater speeds. I've always talked to my students, there's this fine line going from slow to fast, and we're going to witness that when we learn our first rudiment next week, which is going to be the single stroke roll. Okay, so speaking of the first rudiment, there's an exercise that we did in the last episode, and that is 8-8-16. That's where you have 8 hits on the right hand, 8 hits on the left, 16, and then reverse that 8-8-16. Okay, so let's try that together. Okay, that's the free stroke in motion. We're going to do that right now. And I suggest doing this with a metronome. And what a metronome is a timekeeping device. And this one right here happens to be the Dr. Beat 66, DB66, and this has been with me since 1993. It is going to be the metronome that I'm going to use on this series as long as it lasts. I think a good tempo to start out, just kind of like how Kelvin and Kai and I were doing, which is 85 beats per minute. And I have the eighth notes dialed in. So the quarter note equals 85 beats per minute, and the eighth note is twice as fast as the quarter note. We're going to learn about what is a quarter note and eighth note, but just realize that if you dial your metronome in 85 beats per minute, and make sure you get those eighth notes in so you can line up with that metronome. Now, what kind of metronome should you get if you don't have one? Okay, there's all kinds of different kinds of metronomes out there. You can download apps onto your phone. This one is obviously not an app or anything, but I can, if you listen to it, I can have the quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, or triplets. Now, you may not know what those notes mean, but that's okay. You will eventually. The one thing I recommend with your metronome is that you can subdivide with it. And what I mean by subdivide is I can go through and make it twice as fast, or 4 times as fast, or 3 times as fast, as we just heard here. Also is different time signatures. So in this case, I can do this high click on one of every 4. Okay, that lets me know where the 1 is. Or if I want 3/4 time. 3. Okay, so, and we're going to learn about time signatures, of course, in the next episode. But for right now, just think about your metronome being at 85 beats per minute, and that 8th note is dialed in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that metronome on, and I'm going to count you off for 8, 8, 16. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, here we go. Okay, so now there's some different strokes involved. There's just not free strokes in 8, 8, 16, or 8 on the hand sometimes is what we call it. Okay, so the first stroke obviously is a silent upstroke because you have to get prepared to play from your set position. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, downstroke. And now a silent upstroke happens on my left. We talked about this earlier with Kelvin. And so we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, ready, switch, downstroke, upstroke. 1, 2 for 16, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now the left hand. See how I just keep that right hand stopped? And the left hand stops and stays still. Basically, when you're doing that 8th stroke on the right hand, you come down and make that a downstroke and leave it 1 inch above the pad. And then the left is coming up for the lefts on 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, downstroke. Now upstroke on the right, right? And that happens instantaneously. Okay, so let's do it again together. Let's slow it down so you folks really have a chance to play along with me. We're going to go down to 70 beats per minute. We're going to just go ahead and take our time with this. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, and go. Downstroke. Here we go. 7, 8, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16. Okay, so the reason why I like this exercise a lot is because, yes, we're doing 8 on the hand, but then there's that 16 that gets you to really focus on what you're doing in that one hand. So if you can't get 8, 8, 16 down off the bat, that's okay, because you can just sit there with the right hand and just do consecutive free strokes. Okay, eventually you want to do 8, 8, 16. So what you can do with your metronome after you get accustomed to, let's say, 70 beats per minute or 85, whichever level you're at, is you can bump it up to 90 or 10 more beats per minute, however much you can do. So I prefer to go in smaller increments so that way you can get the whole gamma of what it feels like to play within those different tempos. But work on that. We're going to revisit it next week and see how you're doing. Without further ado, I want to introduce a book of mine, and it was written by default, actually. I've written a beginning snare drum book, the book that I used to teach out of for the last 27 years. The publisher was reluctant on actually letting me show them excerpts of the music in that book, which I can totally understand. So obviously I would advise the viewer to go buy the book so they can have it with them, which is what I'm going to do because I had to write a book, and so that way I can show you any of the music without having any copyright violations. And so the book is called Learning to Drum Book 1, and it is a download that you can do. I'm going to provide a link down at the bottom there. It's only $10.95, but if you cannot afford the $10.95, I totally understand. So I'm going to do the best that I can of making sure that I present that music in the video while I'm playing so you can learn along with me. The book Learning to Drum is available, and again, I'm going to provide that link, and hope you enjoy it. I do want to point out some people, obviously in the forward section. So you can go ahead and download that book at any given time, and make sure you have it with you for next week. You can print it out if you want, or you can just keep it on your tablet. The choice is yours. I personally like a hard copy, so I'm going to have mine printed out, and that's of course the reason why for the reduced price of the book, $10.95. It's not much for most people, but for a lot of people out there, it's quite a bit of chunk of change. So I understand that. And of course, this program is designed for not only the person that can afford drum lessons, but also that cannot as well. So again, what we're going to talk about next week is we're going to review 8/8-16, and make sure you take it at a slow pace. If you can't get that exercise down and you think about, oh, you know, I can't remember 16 strokes, and I understand. Just do the right until you feel comfortable with that free stroke and motion. And just do the left. And again, realize that free stroke and motion. And remember what I talked about, the earlier analogy of basketball and how the dribbling the ball, you follow through with it. You're going to notice that you're following through with that stick. And you can see that the fingers really never leave the stick. Okay? So you got to get that down, which is going to pave our way into a first rudiment that we're going to learn, which is going to be the single stroke roll. And we're going to talk about that next week. Again, make sure you pick up the copy, Learning to Drum Book 1. Make sure you have your sticks and pad ready to go for next week. You don't want to, of course, just watch the episode and not participate, right? And just remember to take your time. You're in no rush. There's no, deadlines, due dates. Nothing like that. This is totally at your pace. So even if you didn't fully digest this episode, go back and watch it again. Play along with it again. And I guarantee you, you will get there one day. It is possible if you just really kind of sit there and put your mind to it. Now, how would you practice? Adam, how do I practice? Okay, make sure, and I've always told my students this, is be your own best teacher. What do I mean by that? Well, I tell my students, hey, think about giving yourself a drum lesson. And what would you say? And if you can't come up with that idea, then think about, well, what would Adam say to you if he was at home with you practicing, right? So kind of think about it from that angle. And another term to use, which kind of gives the same type of concept, which is deliberate practicing. This is when you're focusing on one specific thing and mastering it. That's why I said just do the right hand, okay, if you can't get the 8/8-16 down. Now hopefully next week you will, and you'll be able to play along with us. Start at 70, start at 60 even if you have to. The point is you want to start at a point to where you know that you're comfortable and you're able to do that. I really appreciate you joining me here on this episode 4 of Learning a Drum. Stay tuned to next week. We're going to learn about how to read rhythms. The beginning of that, if we have our book in hand. Number 2, we're going to start learning our first drum rudiment, which is the single stroke roll. And number 3, we're going to be reviewing what we just talked about today. So hang in there. Thanks for joining me. My name is Adam Tevlin, and I'm your host for Learning to Drum. Always remember to keep swinging those sticks.